Well, we are excited about Genesis, and if the size of your scripture journal is any indication, we may be there a while. They are substantially larger than the ones we just used in Hebrews, and enjoy those. Those are a great tool. We also have some highlighters over here. You're welcome to highlighters if that helps you. And some of you love to do that, and you love to mark things up. I get real excited to see people who have Bibles that are really marked up. Some of you draw in the margins and you write little things and you connect arrows and all that kind of stuff. And we want to really encourage you in that. For some of you, those notebooks that you have used to study different books of the Bible are precious heirlooms in your family. And some of you have decades of notebooks or journals or different things that you've used, scratch pads, whatever, that you have used over the years to study the Bible. And if you need some help with figuring out how to do that, we'd love to help you think through that, what that looks like for you. And one of the things, of course, that is really, really helpful when you're studying a book of the Bible is to read that book of the Bible. I know it's rocket science, right? But we want to encourage you in that. And so this week, if you want to do some reading in the book of Genesis, we're going to read several chapters just today with you. And then you make that journal your own, write your name on it, and keep that and use that, and that'll be a great thing. Tucked into the front of those is the graphic from the wonderful people. Did you already say this? No, good. I was tuning. And tucked in the front of that is a wonderful graphic from the folks at the Bible Project, and we're going to watch their video and introduction to Genesis in just a few moments, and all of that beautiful artwork that they do to kind of illustrate what the book is about. You have a copy of that finished piece tucked in the front of your scripture journal, and so hang on to that. That may be a useful guide to you, and there'll be lots more useful handouts that we give you along the way as we work through this book together. I want to read to you from a wonderful commentary that I found by a young pastor. I always get excited when I read really smart people who love Jesus, who are younger than me. That gives me a lot of hope for the church going forward. And this is by a guy named Kurt Strassner. And I want to read you some excerpts from this. It's a wonderful piece. And the first line of this really struck me as I was studying on Genesis. And there's some wonderful resources out there. I know some of you get really excited about old books. I know that I get really excited about old books. And I was really excited about studying Genesis because it meant that I finally got to really get in depth into Robert Candlish's commentary on Genesis. That is the one that Charles Spurgeon called the definitive work on Genesis. And someday, if I ever write a book, I want Charles Spurgeon to write, something on the back cover and say, this is the definitive work on whatever, Of course, he's with the Lord now. That might be a little hard to achieve, but that is how good Robert Candlish's commentary on Genesis is. And so old and new, obviously, we've been studying this book as God's church for a very long time. I am encouraged to know that the contemporary scholarship that's coming out of it is just as good as what has been around for hundreds of years. Let me read you this excerpt, and I hope it will be helpful to you. I think Genesis is one of those books that we all have some familiarity with. We certainly all maybe grew up on Bible stories that are from the book of Genesis, or we've just studied these things. Some of you were fortunate enough to study it at home growing up or even in school, and it is critical to our lives. So let me read you this little piece, and then we're going to show you this video and read a few chapters together, and then we will adjourn outside and sing some songs in praise of our God Creator. Genesis is the first book of the Bible. That's not the part, by the way, that got me, okay? I knew that. Genesis is the first book of the Bible, he writes, the beginning of everything but God. And that's the part that got me. The beginning of everything but God. If we had to give it a contemporary English title, we might call it the Book of Beginnings, or maybe just In the Beginning. This is what the ancient Hebrews called it, Bereshith, meaning in the beginning. The title we use today, Genesis, comes from the Greek word that means birth or origin. And this book tells the account of how the universe was born. But there are more beginnings in the book of Genesis. Genesis records the beginning of the human family, tracing the family tree all the way back to its roots in Adam and Eve. It depicts the beginning of sin, following this polluted river back to its fountainhead in the Garden of Eden, and further through the family history of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the forefathers of the Messiah, Jesus. Genesis draws up the beginnings, the blueprints of God's great plan of salvation for fallen humanity. So Genesis teaches us about the beginnings of the world, the beginnings of the human race, the problem of sin, and God's plan of salvation. All of these themes are so important and find their origin in this book. And that means Genesis is a very significant book, and our study of it extremely important for our understanding of our God, of ourselves, of our Bible, and of our world. Genesis is a book of beginnings, but it's also a book about God. In the beginning, God is the opening freeze frame of the Bible. If we try to go back before the world sprang into being, we find God. If we ask where the world came from, Genesis answers God. If we wonder why the universe continues to operate in an orderly, timely, predictable fashion, the answer in Genesis is God. And as we ponder how all of this ancient information has been preserved and passed down to us, the answer again is God. Yes, you got it. And who gave this book to Moses and had him write it down for the ages. So perhaps the best modern title for the book of Genesis would be In the Beginning, God. As I just stated, the book of Genesis will be an important component for our understanding of the world in which we live. What you believe or don't believe about Genesis is determinative in the development of your worldview. This is because what you do with Genesis largely determines how you answer questions like, where did the world come from? Where did I come from? What is the purpose for my being on earth? Is there a God? And if so, what are my responsibilities to him? Why is the world as tangled up as it is? And is there a solution? How a person answers those questions forms the foundation for the worldview, the basic approach to life that he or she holds. And if we want to think honestly about which worldview is right, we must take seriously the book of Genesis. Furthermore, if we want to persuade our friends that the biblical, God-centered worldview is the correct worldview, we must understand Genesis and be able to dialogue intelligently with them about it. If this seems far-fetched, then just think through Genesis chapter 1 for just a moment. From the very first page of the Bible, we can address hot-button issues like evolution, the sanctity of human life, and the relationship between the sexes. What you believe about Genesis chapter 1 will go a long way in determining how you deal with those same issues that are so important in our world at this moment. The same applies to your understanding of the rest of Genesis, the origin of the world, the question of race, the nature of science. All of these questions find wonderful answers in the book of Genesis. What you believe about Genesis and how familiar you are with it decisively shapes your worldview. And your understanding of Genesis also goes a long way toward determining how well you understand the rest of the Bible. What really is sin, and why is it so bad? What does Paul mean when he styles Jesus as the second Adam in Romans 5? Was God's sending of his Son merely a reaction to human sin, or was this in the plan all along? Is the idea of the Trinity simply a New Testament idea? Who was this Abraham who's mentioned so often as an example of faith? And just an aside, for those of you that have been with us for the last year or so, or several months back, in Hebrews, we talked about Abraham quite a bit. And what was Jesus talking about when he urged his disciples to remember Lot's wife in Luke 17? All of these Bible questions and many, many more can only be fully answered by opening up Genesis. Genesis is the account of beginnings, one that impacts our entire worldview and our understanding of the Bible as a whole. But who are its main characters? Well, the list has to begin with God. After all, he's the one who begins, ends, and carries along this magnificent history. He spoke the universe into being. He declared it all good. He looked on as mankind rebelled. He pronounced both the curse on mankind and the promise to redeem us. He presided over the flood. He rescued Noah. He called Abraham to be the father of many nations. He led him to the land of Canaan. He kept the chosen family tree alive through the miraculous birth of Isaac. He blessed Jacob and made his family into a great nation, and he did it all for his own glory. So the primary character in the book of Genesis is none other but God. The first human character we encounter is obviously Adam. Not that Adam, Adam in the Bible. The first human being made from the dust of the ground, placed in authority over God's good earth, given a wife to be his helper, communing unhindered with God, but eventually falling into sin and birthing a race of men and women bent on repeating his folly. One of the most memorable characters in Genesis is Noah. A sinner like us, Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord, it says in Genesis chapter 6. When the fallout of Adam's sin had become too great to tolerate and God was planning a worldwide flood to cleanse the earth, he let Noah in on his plan. He gave him plans for a giant ship. And he kept Noah and his family safe inside that ark while the rest of the world perished. Noah then, like Adam, became a single seed to which all subsequent humans can trace their family tree. God's plan to rescue humankind eventually shifted from Noah to Abram. Later we call him Abraham. And God called this man to become the father of a great nation. He sent him on a pilgrimage to that nation's future home. He gave him and his 90-year-old wife a miracle baby to get the family started. There's a story. In his trust of God's promise, in his obedience to God's sometimes very strange instructions, and in his willingness to go wherever God called him, Abraham became, for every generation since, the supreme example of what it means to have faith in God. Abraham's son was Isaac, also a man of faith. Isaac followed the Lord after his father Abraham and gave birth to a son who was destined to carry on the lineage of God's chosen nation. Isaac's son was Jacob, a one-time rebellious teenager who deceived his father, stole from his brother, and dishonored his father-in-law. The younger son of Isaac would eventually meet God face to face and be forever changed. Even his name was changed to Israel, from which the chosen nation eventually drew its name. Jacob had 12 sons, and we won't go into all of them here, but it focuses our attention on the 11th son of the 12, Joseph. A bit of a problem child like his father, Joseph was taken by God through a series of difficult providences, each one of which serves to teach us how faithful the Lord is to work all things together for the good of his people, both for individuals like Joseph and for his people as a whole. Though he couldn't see it, Joseph's individual struggles set the stage for his entire family, the whole tiny nation of Israel, to be preserved and protected, ultimately preparing the way for the most important human character in the book of Genesis, which is Jesus. You say, Jesus is a character in the book of Genesis? Absolutely. In the days following his resurrection, thousands of years after the events recorded in this book, Jesus walked unrecognized along a road with two befuddled Christians. Seeing their distress over the death of their would-be Messiah, Jesus, beginning with Moses, Luke 24 says to us, beginning with Moses, he explained to them the things concerning himself in all the scriptures. And as we walk through its pages, we'll see how through the characters and accounts that it records, this first book of Moses prophesies of Jesus, typifies Jesus, foreshadows Jesus, prepares the way for Jesus, and shows us our need for Jesus. And so our hope is that this book will serve like the spirit of John the Baptist in the wilderness, crying out that we encounter in Genesis, that we would prepare the way for Jesus the Lord. May God grant you his blessing as you study his word and look for his Son. And we look forward to doing that with you.